Again, this is the virtual public information meeting for the Housatonic Valley Rail Trail project. This project's being brought to you with the support of the Selectman Ken Kellogg. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Scott Schatzine. I'm the town engineer, and I'll be the project manager of this project through the duration of the work. With me this evening is Antonio DiCamillo, and Antonio works for Stantec Consulting Services, excuse me. They have been hired by the town to perform the design services for the project, and they also will be providing some construction administration at the tail end of things. The project status at the moment is that we've pretty much completed the preliminary design. That means that we've got a handle on what we want to do, where we want to do it, how we want to do it. We've got some preliminary plans that you'll see a little later on tonight. But we're at the point where we're looking for some public input. That will help with any revisions and changes to the plan before we proceed with the other steps. The other steps that we're going to be looking at after this meeting is a regulatory process with our local boards and commissions and other agencies. Once we get through that process, we'll look at revising the plans, finalizing the plans, and submitting that information to the Department of Transportation. The state will then review the plans, and once they approve the plans, we'll be in a position where we can put together some some bid documents. We'll go out to bid, hopefully pick a contractor, and get into the construction phase. Once the construction phase is done, then we'll get into the records of the project and the project closeout. Just to give you a little bit of general information, this is part of the regional trail system. And in Monroe, it's going to be the last link connecting the trail through Monroe. This is going to run from the existing trail, which pretty much ends in Wolf Park at the north end of the entrance drive that comes in from Purdy Hill Road. We're going to be running the new trail off-road through the park itself over to Purdy Hill Road. We'll cross Purdy Hill Road and run through both the state property and the town property behind the Public Works Garage, wind our way up to the existing pedestrian bridge that is over the Pequannock River, which is located just south of Maple Drive. There is another section of trail that is incomplete at this point. It is the section that runs from Grant Road up to Northbrook Condos, and that is currently under construction as part of the Pepper Street reconstruction project. That work is currently being done and will hopefully be completed early next year, possibly even late this year if that part of the project gets worked on sooner. As far as project funding, we have received 100% funding for construction for this project through LOTSIP, which is the Local Transportation Capital Improvement Program. We received a commitment for funding of $1.46 million from the state of Connecticut. So that's locked in at this point. It can be adjusted contingent on changes that are justifiable. So we'll see what happens with the progress of the project as things move along. Typically, the lot SIP program does not include any funds for design. But in this case, we're very fortunate that our selectman, Ken Kellogg, was able to identify a funding source through the Connecticut Recreational Trails Program. So thanks to him, we have applied for that funding and we received an approval. We have a contract with the state DEEP for that program, and we, as I said, we are currently under design through the program. It's an 80% funds with a 20% town match, and luckily in this case we actually are able to use town services and expense for town staff in lieu of our 20% match. So bottom line, looks like we're going to be in a position where this project has minimal, very little cost to the town. The last segment of funding is for inspection of construction services. The inspection portion of the project is funded under the LOTSIP program, and the grant for the design also includes a little bit of overlap on some construction administrative functions. So we're in really good shape as far as funding goes, and hopefully the rest of the project will fall in place. So at this point, I want to turn things over to Antonio, and he will bring you through a PowerPoint presentation of the details.
All right, thanks, Scott. So I'm Antonio DiCamillo. Scott mentioned the civil engineer for the project, and I'm going to be going through basically just an overview of the trail and a little more detail on what we're doing. So, all right. So just so you know, the presentation is going to be recorded and it will be posted on a website. We will have the questions answered at the end of the presentation. I think if we don't have many folks, we can just go ahead and chime in at the end of the presentation and we can answer your questions. And we are also going to have some email addresses that are going to be posted on here in case anyone has any additional questions. Quick agenda, introduction. I think Scott did a pretty good job with that. So I'm going to give you the project overview and project considerations and public comments. Again, here are your project representatives, as Scott mentioned. So tonight's goal is to provide an overview of the project, review the project impacts and opportunities, discuss the next steps, and to receive comments from the public. So a couple of quick notes. So the funding source, like Scott mentioned, this is LOTSIP funded and also Connecticut Recreational Trails Program. One of the key things that makes this project exciting is that it does fill a gap that we have between two existing trails. And as far as the trail route, I'm going to go through that on the next slide and give you a little more detail on that. So the project starts just south of Maple Drive, and it joins an existing trail in this area here. And then it heads north across the Quantic River. It crosses some wetlands and then goes east and north around the DPW facility until it crosses Pretty Hill Road. And then at that point, it is in Wolf Park for the remaining of the way. It heads north between the access drive and the wetlands until it meets up at the northern end of the Wolf Park entrance drive. So, okay, so a little more detail now. This is the beginning again. This is Maple Drive in this area here. This is where the existing trail is. We are going to be joining the existing trail in this area. We're also going to be proposing some improvements here, we're going to be adding a berm along with some plantings and some fencing. We want to do this because we want to try to make sure that folks stay on the trail instead of coming off the trail onto other areas that are not part of the trail system. So heading north from here, we're going to cross an existing wooden bridge that we are only going to be replacing the railings for, so we're not really touching the bridge itself. The key thing here is that this is the area where there are some old mill ruins that have historical value. So we have archaeological folks that are involved in the project that are reviewing this area, and they're going to put together a report, and they're going to be, basically outline what we can and can't do to in this area in order to not impact any archaeological items here. As we continue to head north, we are going to maintain an existing access from Maple Drive in this area here. And then continuing on from there, we are going to need to cross a wetland area. This area is very tight. We have a private property, and we have a wetland area and some challenging slopes. Speaking of the slopes, we are going to the whole trail is going to be ADA compliant for trail construction. So in this area here, in order to minimize the wetland impacts, what we're going to do is we are going to install a wall on both sides of the trail, along with a protective railing, to again try to limit that footprint of the wetland impacts. We are going to be submitting to wetlands fairly soon, so there's going to be a chance to weigh in there when we have our public hearing for that. One more thing I wanted to point out in this area here, this area is mostly on deep property, so Connecticut deep property. And we've been talking with those folks a lot actually lately about permits and things like that, and permissions and all that. So we're in touch with them, and we're going to need to go to them also for a few permits. Once we cross this area here, we are going to head north into the DPW garage area. And here is that segment here. So here the trail is going to run between the wetlands and the DPW property, and we are trying to just impact things as little as possible. Couple of key points in here. We are going to be installing a fence, a 6-foot fence between the trail and the DPW yard, for safety reasons, obviously, to prevent people from wandering in there. The other consideration in this area is that we are currently doing some environmental testing to see if there are any soils that would require any special treatment, that are impacted, that require special measures during construction. So that study is going on right now. We are also very aware that in this area there is a floodplain and a floodway for most of the trail here. Those are very sensitive areas. So we are proposing to install the trail pretty much a grade here, so that we don't have any net fill here or any adverse impacts to the floodplain. As we continue north, we are going to get to Purdy Hill Road, and we are going to be installing a new crosswalk in this area here. We are also going to be installing rapid flashing beacon system here that is going to be, they're essentially pedestrian crossing signs, except they are illuminated. They have flashing lights. So there's a set of 2, and I'll show you a detail in a little bit of exactly how they work, but there's a set of 2 of them. So if folks come up to the crosswalk, they hit the button and the lights flash, and it alerts the drivers that somebody's trying to cross in that area. So that's a safety feature that we've used in the past in other trails and has worked fairly well. Moving north of this area now, we are crossing the road, and we are in Wolf Park. And a couple of things that I wanted to point out in one of the areas here where we first get into Wolf Park. There's going to be some clearing that's going to need to be done for the project. Just in general, the trail is going through mostly wooded areas, but the vast majority of the vegetation in this area here is they are diseased and pine trees that are not in good shape. A lot of them are dead. They're just clustered together. We had our landscape architect come out there with us and take a look at those, to make sure, that he concurred with our thoughts on that. So we're going to take advantage of that and clear out some of the trees that probably should come down. Heading north from there, obviously, there are there's vegetation and trees that are going to be impacted by the trail. Again, it's in the woods, and it's tough to get around all the trees. So we have picked out a few that we selectively are trying to get around. So we're going to do our best with that. But the key thing here is to try not to do a lot of grading. If we can install the trail at grade, we're limiting the disturbance, and that really is the goal here. So heading north from here, we are going to need to install some retaining walls, some segmental block retaining walls. These walls will also help to limit disturbance. As you can see, we are fairly close to the wetlands and the drive, so it's a very tight squeeze there. So the walls are really necessary. They're going to be segmental block walls, like I said. It's going to have protective fencing on top, and I will show you also a detail of that in a little bit. Okay, so continuing north from this area here, again, we have a few more walls that we're going to install next to the wetlands here. We are not anticipating any direct impact to the wetlands aside from the original impacts that we noted on the first sheet. We're also proposing some plantings that are going to be put in here. Again, we haven't detailed that yet. We're working on that right now. We are also going to maintain access to this existing parking area that you see here. And we're also going to be installing a few culverts along the way. Here is the first one heading north, and I'll talk about that a little bit also in a little bit later. So now we're at the last segment here. We're close to the northern end of the drive of the park, and as we're heading north, we have 3 culvert crossings that we're installing over in this area. We have a planted slope. And as we get to the end here, we are going to be installing a paved apron at either side of the trail to kind of clean up, that end of the trail. And we're also going to be installing removable bollards, and those are going to prevent, vehicles from getting in here, which, obviously we don't want happening. So, so with that, that is the overall route description. So I'm going to go through a couple of the key aspects of the project now. So as I mentioned before, the top image here shows the typical trail section. It's going to be a stone dust trail, 10 feet wide. It's going to have 1 foot shoulders on either side, and in areas where we need the railings, this is basically what the railing is going to look like. So this is kind of like your typical section. The image on the left shows the segmental block wall of how this is going to work. We are in the process of designing it and deciding, how it's going to fit in, what it's going to look like, and all that. That's kind of part of the next step that we're in here. So these are the rectangular flashing beacons that I mentioned before. As you can see, they're pedestrian signs with some flashing lights below them. They are going to be solar powered. They're going to have a push button on both sides. So they are they're 2-sided, obviously, right? So you're going to have a set of 2. So when somebody hits this button, all the lights flash to make sure that the traffic, can see that, and they slow down for people that are trying to cross. And this is just a typical 3-rail wood fence detail of what we're looking to install. Project consideration. So permitting is a key aspect of just about any project, but more so of this one. There's a lot of permits that we're going to need to get. These may not be all of them. We're still, kind of, navigating through that process. But I think this is, the majority of them. A couple that I wanted to point out. We are going to go through inland wetlands for a formal permit with those folks, and there's going to be a public hearing for that. So, folks will get to, chime in at that point if they wish to do so. And we are also going to be submitting a wetlands permit to Connecticut Deep, since we do have some wetland impacts, and that is they are on their property. So we've spoken with them about that, so we know exactly what they're looking for in that regard. Additional project considerations. These are kind of the things that are above and beyond, your typical trail project. I touched on the archaeological investigation a little bit. That's the top right. You'll see an image of the bridge, and again, this was part of an old mill that was at this site. So our folks are mapping the area, and they're doing test holes and stuff to see just to basically give us a final map that and guidance as to what we can and can't do in these areas. We're not anticipating any impact to any of this, the archaeological areas. Environmental investigation, as I noted before, also we are having environmental folks do some testing of the soils along the trail route. We're looking to see if there are any impacted or contaminated soils that we may need to deal in a different manner and during construction. So that is also ongoing right now. Floodplain review. The DPW yard area is in a floodplain and a floodway, so that is a very sensitive area, and we need to be careful how we design a trail through these areas. The key thing that how we're handling that is to basically install the trail at grade, so that we're not going to have any fill in those areas that could impact flood elevations. And drainage improvements. As you saw from the slides, we do have a few culvert crossings. These are typically installed where we already have either a swale or a culvert just upstream of the area, and any other area that we noticed that was missing one that could impact the trail. So we have several of those. They are designed for the 25-year storm. And the other item that I want to talk about is that on a couple of the major ones, we're installing a small sediment basin just upstream of the culvert, so that that'll serve to take the drainage from the drive and the road, and settle out some sediments before it discharges onto the wetlands. So here's the tentative project schedule at this time. As you can see, preliminary design has been completed, like Scott mentioned. We're looking to start submitting permits at the end of this month. Final design is going to be is scheduled for October 2021, and we're looking to do construction from March 2022 through December 2022. So I think that wraps up my presentation, and again, you can see on here that we have some contact information for Scott and I, so you can feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. But I'm going to turn it over to Scott now to wrap things up a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. Well, I guess it's both of us at this point. We're looking for any input or questions anybody has. So you can just chime in, and we'll see what we can, how we can respond. Anybody? We have such a big group here tonight that you have to get in line for your comments. All right, I think, Antonio, I think you did such a great job on this that there's no questions at this point.
I covered it all. Thanks.
Yeah, although for the record, I do want to reiterate once again that there will be other opportunities for public input, mainly during the regulatory public hearings which are to come. I certainly am available anytime. If anybody has any questions, please call me, and I'd be happy to answer questions or walk you through any type of issue that you may have. So please do that. We also will be not only putting this presentation on that website, but we'll be uploading any new information onto that as we move along, and we get some final plans. We'll put them on there so that you can just check in with the web page and see what's happening along those lines. So with that, I think that concludes our public information meeting, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending and say good night.